Hi guys. Tonight we step into the echoing stone corridors of a medieval castle. Torches flicker along the walls as the wind whistles through cracks in the heavy wooden doors. It looks romantic to a tourist, but living here on a winter's night would be brutal. Castles were freezing. Without central heating, insulated windows, or a modern mattress, your deadliest enemy was not a rival knight. It was the cold. Before we get comfortable, take a quick moment to like and subscribe if you enjoy what I do. And if you're listening right now, post your location and the local time in the comments. I love seeing where in the world people are tuning in from. Now dim the lights, slow your breathing, and imagine preparing for bed in a medieval stronghold. You trudge across the flagstone floor, boots scraping stone worn smooth by centuries of feet. The cold bites your skin even though you're fully dressed. Those famous thick walls that stopped battering rams also trapped cold air like a giant refrigerator. Once the sun dropped, the temperature plummeted. Your breath forms clouds inside. Castles were designed to keep enemies out, not warmth in. Architects thought about moats, drawbridges, and arrow slits. Insulation was never on the plan. Many castles in northern Europe stood on windswept hills, brilliant for spotting invaders, but a curse for sleeping. Wind forced icy drafts through every crack. You might think fireplaces saved them, but no. Even a roaring blaze in the Great Hall barely warmed the circle around it. Step away and the air turned frigid. Travelers wrote of shock when they saw frost inside bedrooms, icicles on bed curtains, or a wash basin frozen solid. Chroniclers treated this as normal. If your walls didn't grow a thin layer of rime in January, you were lucky, yet people survived. They developed rituals to trap every fragment of heat. Fires were banked, beds draped with curtains, clothes layered until mobility became secondary, and everyone hoped the draft wouldn't be too cruel. You enter your bed chamber. The bed is raised high, not for style, but to escape the coldest air that sinks to the floor. Still, the stone radiates chill upward the moment you climb under the covers. Historians debate whether castles ever became truly comfortable. Some say tapestries and hangings helped. Others insist the cold always won. The truth lies in the middle. You lie back, the wooden frame creaking as the straw-stuffed mattress rustles. Outside, the wind moans against battlements. An oil lamp struggles to stay lit. Your toes ache even in your daytime clothes. You hear distant footsteps of a changing guard, the creak of frosty rafters. A dog barking faintly in the courtyard. None of it makes you feel warmer. It's tempting to imagine nobles snug in luxury while peasants froze. In fact, peasants often had it better. Their small timber and daub cottages trapped heat efficiently. One fire could warm an entire family. Meanwhile, a lord shivered in a stone chamber so vast that 5 hearths barely dented the cold. Contemporaries noticed the irony. Letters from clerics and visitors complained that beds were grand, but nights were bitter. They advised travelers to pack extra cloaks for survival, not display. As you lie there, you realize the ingenuity required to get through a single night. You layered fabrics, stacked furs, pulled curtains tight, shared beds with companions or animals. Each step created microclimates of warmth in an environment designed to be cold. These people were survivalists. Every bedtime was a test, every winter a trial. Sleep was engineered through rituals passed down for generations. Now we move to the Great Hall, the beating heart of the castle at night. Long tables stretch across the floor, polished by elbows and tankards. The air smells of roasted meat, spilt ale, damp wool, and smoke that never leaves the rafters. The central hearth roars brightly, a defiant island of heat. This is where everyone gathered after sunset, not just to eat but to absorb warmth before retreating to icy chambers. Servants carry trenchers of bread, jugs of ale, platters of steaming pottage. Dogs scavenge underfoot. The hall is loud with laughter and song, and for a little while, you forget the howling wind outside. The Great Hall was the only space where heating was remotely successful. A fire was fed almost constantly with logs, sometimes entire tree trunks. If you had rank, you sat near it. Others shivered along the edges, but even here the heat traveled only so far. Move a few feet away and the walls seemed to breathe frost. Heat rose into the smoke-stained rafters while those on the floor huddled in cloaks. Only a lucky few were warm. Everyone else pretended to be. Feasts sometimes doubled as strategic heating sessions. Nobles scheduled huge gatherings in the bitter months, knowing hundreds of bodies plus the fire would create something like coziness. Servants were even told to stand closer together for extra warmth. When the feast ended, the fire was allowed to burn low. Within an hour or two, the hall fell back into frigid silence. Imagine lingering by the dying fire, unwilling to leave, your face hot while your back already feels the creeping cold. The smoke stings your eyes, but you dread climbing the spiral staircase to your chamber. That transition, walking from the golden firelight into a narrow torchlit passage, was a shock. The draft hit like a knife. The warmth drained from your bones as if the castle itself fed on it. Some nobles slept in the great hall on high-backed benches pulled near the hearth, risking sparks and smoke rather than facing the frozen stone above. Travelers complained more about that journey than the sleep itself. The brief exposure from warmth to cold left them shivering all night. The Great Hall was a ritual, a gathering of warmth before surrendering to the cold. Without it, the castle would have been unbearable. Now you climb higher, away from the fading glow. The damp cold clings to your bones. The walls are 12 feet thick, protection against arrows, but they trap the chill inside. Step just 10 feet from a hearth and you're in an icebox. Written accounts describe noble families sitting directly in front of flames, cloaks over their heads, servants stamping their feet behind them. The fire created a bubble of heat, but the stone refused to yield. Travelers complained walls sweated, moisture condensed and ran down in streaks. In some seasons, moss grew indoors. The psychological toll was severe. People feared the cold more than hunger or illness. You lie there pulling the coverlet tight, listening to wind hiss through arrow slits. Castles were survival machines, but comfort was sacrificed for security. Every winter night reminded you that stone protected you from arrows, but would never keep you warm. The bed itself was a climate machine. The four-poster canopy bed, with its tall carved posts and heavy curtains, trapped your own body heat. It was a medieval tent inside your bedroom. Once closed, the temperature difference could be dramatic. A French duchess traveled with her bed dismantled on carts. It was life support, not furniture. In English, households' curtains were sometimes waxed or lined with oiled cloth to block drafts. They also created darkness and muffled sound, giving an illusion of privacy. Some argue the warmth was psychological as much as physical, but people believed so strongly in canopy beds that they became a noble necessity. You slide into one, pull the curtain, and instantly the air feels still. Cold, but no longer assaulted by drafts. You hear only the rustle of blankets. Outside, the chamber is vast and inhospitable. Inside, you've carved out a pocket of life. It wasn't foolproof. Curtains could freeze stiff with condensation, but it was the best defense against the nightly siege of cold. Beneath you, the mattress determined comfort. The feather bed was the luxury, a sack of goose or duck feathers, so thick you sat a foot above the frame. They were treasured, passed down, a symbol of status, but they could become suffocatingly hot, trapping heat until you woke drenched in sweat. One guest moaned his host's bed swallowed him like a goose in a pot. For most, reality was the straw tick, a sack of straw, hay, or reeds. It was cheap, easy to refill, and lifted you off the icy floor, but it flattened quickly, poked through the cloth, and harbored fleas. Households beat the bed regularly to fluff it and drive out vermin. To mask the musty smell, people mixed in lavender or mint. Straw mattresses left you itching by morning, but you survived. The choice between feathers and straw mirrored the social ladder, privilege or necessity, both responses to the same cold challenge. Yet, even the most carefully built bed couldn't guarantee survival on its own. Company was the real difference. Sleeping alone let body heat bleed into the walls. Sleeping beside others multiplied warmth. Servants slept at the foot of masters' beds, not just for service, but for the extra warmth. In monasteries, Monks lay side by side in long dormitories, their combined body heat creating a layer of insulation. Soldiers in barracks huddled in rows. A 14th century English nobleman willed that his squires sleep near the chamber fire. The warmth of companionship was as valuable as gold. Animals, especially dogs, were literal heaters. The phrase, "a three-dog night," is later, but the practice is ancient. Large mastiffs curled at your feet could mean the difference between numb toes and comfort. Travelers in Scandinavia sometimes chose to sleep in stables with horses and cattle rather than in unheated guest rooms. The smell was intense, but warmth trumped fragrance. Scholars debate whether bed sharing was routine among nobles or limited to lower classes. Among peasants, whole families piled together under one heap of blankets. Privacy meant nothing when survival was at stake. You lie shoulder to shoulder with others, awkward at first, then grateful as the shared cocoon builds. Better fleas than frostbite. Better a dirty blanket than a sleepless night. In a world of stone and frost, every extra body was a blessing. Clothing at night was another layer of defense. Unlike us, medieval people slept nearly as bundled as by day. The basic garment was a long linen nightshirt, loose and breathable. Over it, a wool tunic or cloak, and crucially, the nightcap or coif. People believed most heat escaped through the head. A sleeper without a cap was dangerously exposed. Manuscripts show figures in bed with heads neatly wrapped. Even feet and hands were bound in strips of cloth, makeshift socks and mittens. Scholars debate whether specialized nightwear existed for peasants. Many simply collapsed in daytime clothes. But for middle and upper classes, distinct sleep linen appears in wills. Modesty was also a factor. With bed sharing common, nakedness was unacceptable. Married couples in art wear caps and long shirts. To dress for bed was to put on armor. The linen is cool at first, then warms. Wool smells of lanolin, the cap muffles sound. You wriggle into your cocoon, swaddled against the dark. Before climbing in, a servant might use a warming pan. This long-handled brass pan held hot coals and was slid between the sheets, radiating heat through perforations. For a few minutes, the bed became almost inviting. Inventories list warming pans as ordinary nightly tools across Europe, yet they posed hazards. Sheets scorched black, or even set ablaze. One account from Italy describes sprinkling herbs on the coals so the smoke purified the air. Simpler versions, clay pots wrapped in cloth, served humbler families. The point was to make the first moments of sleep bearable. You slide in, trap the fleeting warmth, and hope your own body heat will do the rest. The warming pan was a compromise, never enough, but enough to buy you a start. Once upon a time, in a land full of wonders, there lived a kind little fox named Finley. Once upon a time, in a land full of wonders, there lived a kind little flusmatesbirdwesen. Once a purest of hearts could find it, singing flowers, singing flowers, singing flowers. Finley knew that only the purest of hearts could find it, and stepped into a world of fluzzed, Bombarkre Jewish, tree, dragging, sprawled across feet like furry logs. The drawbacks were dirt, hair, and fleas, but the trade-off was simple: better pests than frostbite. The rhythm of a dog's breathing became part of the night's soundtrack. Bedrooms were not fixed sanctuaries. They shifted with the seasons. In winter, families moved to south-facing rooms where the weak sun struck through windows for a few precious hours. Come summer, they retreated to darker, cooler north-facing chambers. Edward IV's household moved entire beds and tapestries seasonally. A logistical ordeal, but essential. A Burgundian courtier complained he lost his chamber to frost one year and chose a narrower room facing the rising sun. The building itself was an adversary. Peasants similarly crowded near the hearth in winter and slept in lofts or barns in summer. Sleep was mobile, dictated by the elements. A bedroom was a temporary camp within the fortress. Now stand by a window. Castle windows were vulnerable holes. Glass was so rare, it was reserved for chapels. Ordinary rooms had wooden shutters that rattled in the wind, letting cold creep through every crack. A practical fix was to stretch oiled or waxed linen across the opening. It emitted a dim amber glow but dulled the shriek of the wind. Some French accounts describe horn windows. Thin slices of animal horn scraped translucent, yellowing and warping but sturdier than cloth. Scholars debate how common these were. The evidence is fragmentary, but it shows the desperation to block the draft. You lean near a shutter, frost forming on the sill. You hear the rattle of wood, the moan of wind, servants stuffing rags and moss into gaps. Peasants used bladder membranes stretched thin. Rooms glowed faintly with distorted shadows. At night, even these coverings hardened with frost. For nobles in high towers, the wind was punishing. A peasant might shiver less in his low hut. And yet, on a moonlit night, silver light slipped through the cracks, a moment of fragile beauty. Medieval sleep was a balance of discomfort and wonder. Fireplaces blazed, but they were terribly inefficient. Chimneys were so wide that most heat escaped with the smoke. You could stand a few paces from a roaring fire and still see your breath. Enormous fires consumed whole wagon loads of timber. A lord in France complained that heating his hall emptied the woods faster than any war. Guests joked the hearth could roast an ox, but couldn't warm a man. Some households added iron firebacks to reflect heat, or tiles to store warmth. Still, your face might burn while your back froze. In contrast, a peasant's small central fire warmed the entire cramped cottage. The grand noble fireplace was partly symbolic, a spectacle of status and light, but practical comfort was limited, and the smoke was relentless. Without proper flues, soot coated everything. A monk in northern England coughed more than he prayed. Tapestries turned gray. Women lamented ruined gowns. Chimneys allowed smoke to drift back into rooms when the wind blew wrong. You tried to sleep while smoke burned your throat. People smeared walls with lime to hide soot streaks, but the smell, charred wood, damp stone, burned wool, was permanent. Some scholars say people adapted, others point to medical complaints of blackened lungs. The truth is, they endured because they had no choice, but they never stopped grumbling. Warmth demanded the sacrifice of clean air. Every warm night meant another smoky morning. Practical measures weren't enough. Cold was also a spiritual enemy. People hung amulets above beds, crosses, relics, or pouches of juniper, rue, and mugwort to repel evil spirits and poisonous night air. Prayers were recited, psalms in monasteries, paternosters and Ave Marias in noble chambers, whispered charms in cottages. A German household manual advised placing iron knives under the pillow to ward off demons. Folk belief said turning shoes upside down stopped frost on toes, or whispering three saints' names kept body heat in. Scholars debate how deeply these were believed. As custom or conviction, they reveal sleep was never trusted. You lie beneath a sprig of juniper, an iron knife hidden under your pillow, whispering a prayer. The night feels less menacing. Faith, superstition, and survival intertwined. Peasants tucked garlic under children's pillows and blessed cattle and byres. The night was a mystery, and spiritual armor was as vital as blankets. Medieval people fought winter with layers of ingenuity and endurance. Castles and cottages alike relied on thick tapestries, wooden panels, bed curtains, shared body heat, and constant fires to hold back the cold. Bedrooms smelled of smoke, damp wool, straw, sweat, herbs, and sometimes livestock, creating an atmosphere both unpleasant and strangely comforting. Heavy stews, warm ale, mulled wine, garlic, and herbal remedies were believed to strengthen the body against freezing nights. Children and the elderly were kept closest to the hearth, wrapped in blankets and furs, yet cold still claimed many lives. Medieval medicine treated winter as a dangerous force capable of disturbing the body's humors. So nightly rituals, warm oils, heated stones, incense, and prayers became part survival, part comfort. Before bed, some chaste luxury, a hot bath, rare and communal, with steamed wooden tubs and herbs like rosemary. More commonly, a cup of warm ale, spiced wine, or hot mead spread inward warmth. A record from the court of Charles VI of France has the physician prescribing hot mead to keep chill from the bones. Stones wrapped in cloth or leather pouches of heated sand served as primitive hot water bottles placed at the foot of the bed. You sigh as your frozen feet find them. Such indulgences were fragile, fading by midnight, but they offered psychological grace, moments of ease that made the endless chill tolerable. Every sip, every heated stone was a small rebellion. Not everyone had private chambers. Monks, soldiers, apprentices, and servants slept collectively. Monastic dormitories were vast halls lined with rows of cots so close you could hear your neighbor breathe. The air was thick with coughing and snoring, but the sheer press of bodies retained more warmth than any isolated room. A chronicler noted the cloister was warmer than the Lord's Tower. Soldiers in barracks shared straw beds, cloaks doubling as covers, the smell a pungent stew of sweat, leather, and smoke. Candles burned for psychological comfort. Historians debate whether this was intentional warmth or a byproduct of discipline and necessity. Likely both. You lie there, straw crackling, a neighbor coughing. The draft still seeps through high windows, but collective body heat dulls its edge. You feel safe, safer than alone in an echoing stone room. Apprentices and maids rolled out straw pallets in corners and under staircases, huddling together. Their quarters were smaller and more crowded, thus warmer. Sleep was communal, but even here, sleep was never uninterrupted. Someone always rose to stoke the fire. Medieval people practiced segmented sleep, a first sleep after dusk, a waking period around midnight to tend fires, pray, or check animals, then a second sleep until dawn. A 15th century physician recommended using that waking interval for reflection or intimacy. But for servants trudging across icy floors, it was duty. You hear the crackle of fresh wood, blow on embers, pray they catch. In some households, adults took turns on watch. Monastic bells rang through the night, ensuring someone was awake to tend the heat. Historians link segmented sleep to long northern European nights, but the fire's pulse was always central. Imagine waking in the dead of night, pushing back the blanket, the icy slap of air, fumbling for a log, your breath plumbing. Sparks flare, warmth pulses again, and you crawl back beneath the covers relieved. Sleep was managed, guarded, negotiated. When the fire dimmed, a candle remained the only glow, and a fragile source of warmth. Beeswax candles burned clean and honey-scented for the wealthy. Tallow candles made from animal fat smoked and reeked, but they still gave off heat close by. Some noble women demanded a dozen candles in the chamber, using light as a substitute heater. The danger was constant. A toppled candle could set bed curtains aflame. One German squire awoke to find his blankets burning. Yet people accepted the risk. In a cold chamber, a single candle on a stand became a companion, its soft halo shrinking the world to a small circle of flickering safety. Rushlights, cheap reeds dipped in fat, served travelers in inns. Monks kept lamps burning in dormitories for warmth and comfort. The air smelled of melted fat and soot, bedclothes stained with wax. The candle was survival, a fragile ally in the enormous night. Still, winter often overwhelmed every defense. Frost formed inside castle walls, icicles hung from rafters, and travelers crowded into smoky inns or stables just to share warmth with strangers and animals. Stories spread of guards freezing at their posts and pilgrims dying in snow-covered passes, reminding everyone how thin the line between sleep and death could be. Yet the hearth remained the center of life, a source of heat, hope, and community. Families huddled around flames, nobles displayed roaring fires as symbols of status, and peasants prayed beside glowing embers through the long nights. In the end, survival depended less on stone walls than on blankets, shared warmth, resilience, and the simple human determination to endure until dawn.